Welcome to the Cyber Center for Biblical Studies. Hi, my name is Herb Bateman. Today we have with us Michael McKay, PhD from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, here to talk with us about a publication, a new publication on translating the book of Titus clause by clause. It's part of the e-book for translating the New Testament, and his focus has been working us through and helping us understand the book of Titus. Michael, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So tell me about this book that you've authored. How does it break out?
Well, the book is divided into three parts. It has an introduction, which you and I have co-authored together.
Okay.
And then it has the clausal outline section and the main challenge of the book, the main workbook area. And then the third and final part is the answer key.
Okay. So tell me, let's work through each one of these sections. Let's begin with the introduction. Tell me, what's in the introduction? What are you introducing me to, or as a reader of this book?
Sure. The introduction is meant to guide the student or the pastor or whoever is wanting to pursue Titus in the Greek, is guiding them in the how-tos of how to break this down. So it is introducing you to dependent clauses and independent clauses and how those are going to be outlined in the middle section, so that when they finally get to that section, they will know the order of progression that they can work through each sentence and accomplish each chapter and ultimately finish the book.
Okay. Every book is different. If I were to read Paul, he's going to have some, Romans, he's going to have some stylistic issues. When I read Jude, he's going to have some stylistic issues. Do you deal with any of that in the introduction? Do you help me, give me tips on translating Titus?
Yeah, some of the unique things about Titus that Paul does is it's a book of lists. It has lots of lists that he provides, lists on how to be elders in the church, what kind of qualities they should not have and what kind of qualities they should have, all the way down to lists about how slaves were supposed to operate. And so what we find in the book is that these characteristics are listed out. And so it's helpful to introduce the student to these lists up front, and so they can know that when they get to them and how they're going to be organizing them in the Greek, they can be aware of that, because that can be very difficult, because many of them are not complete sentences. Words have to be added in order to make a grammatical sense of what Paul is writing there.
Okay, good. Are there a lot of hot boxes? I think of Jude. There's humongous number of hot boxes, words that are used only in Jude. Are there a lot? Do you see a lot of that in Titus?
No, not nearly as much as you would in Jude.
Okay.
The main thing that would probably be maybe somewhat of an equivalent that way is though that there are a lot of elided words. In other words, there's a lot of missing words that you have to add in order to make sense. So you will have, for example, in chapter 2, Paul says to speak these things, and he goes on to say what Titus is supposed to be speaking to the older men. And then a few verses down, he says, and to the older women. Well, you have to fill in that verb again, speak these things to the older women, in order to help make sense of what Paul is commanding Titus to do.
Okay. Now, let's talk about that middle section. When I move into that section 2, what can I expect to find?
Yes, section 2 is broken down into several parts as well as you work through the Greek text. So, for example, the book is broken down into 7 sections as far as how it's organized according to Paul's argument there. And in each of those sections, there's a brief contextual overview of that, so that the student or the pastor can kind of understand the gist of what these next few verses or paragraphs are going to be about. After that, then the Greek text is provided so that the student can practice doing their verbal recognition. And then below that is the actual structural outline of that section. So where the independent, or I should say the dependent and the independent clauses are distinguished, and they're spatially located on the page in order so that you can have some guidance as to what is modifying something else.
Okay. So when you say they're spaced on the page, am I able to put my own English translation underneath each clause?
Correct. So there will be an independent clause, which will be all the way to the left-hand side, and then there will be a space between that and the very next clause, whether that clause is a dependent clause for that main independent clause or whether it's a secondary independent clause. But yes, there's space there so that the student can write in their own personal translation there. And what it does is effectively takes these 46 verses and breaks them down into these manageable clauses so that they can think through them bit by bit and attack them that way.
Okay, so it's less intimidating.
Correct.
All right. All right, now let's move on to this third section. What can I expect as I'm done working through this middle section. I've done the highlighting of the verbs and tenses, and I've translated. What does the third section help me do?
The third section is an answer key. So it's, but not the answer key. It's just my own understanding of how to semantically and syntactically understand these verbals and maybe any independent clausal markers that are in the text. So, for example, this section is going to be the main verbs are going to be listed out, and there's going to be a brief definition given of them. And then they're going to be analyzed syntactically to show, okay, how do they function in this sentence? Are they the main verb of an independent clause or a main verb of a dependent clause? And then thirdly, semantically, how they are to be understood within that sentence. So we can go from how they're functioning syntactically in the sentence to actually specifically in the sentence, what do they mean?
Okay. All right, so that's a nice breakout. Introduction, interactive section, answer key section to the work that I've done in that middle section. How does this help me? I mean, on the one hand, it's nice because I've done my own work, but how does this prepare me to be able to preach or teach the text? How might this be supplemental to a commentary or another work? Or can I just do this and then that's all I need to do to go and teach the text? How is this book helpful? Have its limitations? Let's phrase it that way.
Okay, I think this is a very helpful tool. At minimum, if you're just beginning to approach the book of Titus, it already provides you with a breakdown of the text. So as I said previously, it's broken down into 7 different parts. Of course, there's the introduction and the conclusion, so when you separate that out, you've got 5 different parts, chapter 2 being the most significant one, the most lengthy. So from a pastor's perspective, or someone who's going to be teaching through the book of Titus, it kind of gives them a general idea of how they could maybe organize the text based on keeping Paul's thoughts together. As far as for a student's perspective, you can move beyond that, just that general overview, and now you're actually getting to see how the argument of Paul is progressing, what his main themes are, his main topics are. Well, those are going to be your independent clauses. Perhaps he's going to provide reasons for why a certain command should be done or an explanation of how it's going to be done. Well, these are going to be your independent clauses that are going to help modify those main verbals.
Okay. Is that all I need, or would you recommend commentaries? How might this be a supplement to commentaries for a pastor?
Commentaries are always helpful to get multiple opinions, and in fact the answer key is really just one among many different options that someone could get. So the answer key shouldn't be looked at as a definitive answer. There's interpretation involved there, my interpretation, and so it's always good to maybe compare that and get further argumentation from maybe a commentary that's going to discuss those issues, and then the student will be able to weigh out the pros and cons of a particular nuance or a particular argument.
Okay, but yet there's some ownership because they've done their own work.
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
Very good.
At the end of the day, they'll know why they have gone the way they've gone, why they believe what they believe about the text.
Well, good. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us and explaining this book on translating Titus clause by clause. And thank you for joining us. And I trust that you might, this interview might spur you on to think, hey, I'd like to work my way through Titus. But in the meantime, I trust that you'll have a great day and walk with the King and be a blessing. Till next time.